She sat there in that upscale jewelry store, watching them all snicker and whisper about her grandmother's ring. "That old thing," the sales associate had said with this condescending smile. "Honey, we don't really deal with costume jewelry here." But 3 minutes later, when the master jeweler took one look through his loupe and his face went completely white, that laughter stopped real quick. Before we dive into this story that will make you question everything you think you know about judging people, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail of what happened when that appraisal came back at $50 million. Let's get into it. You know how they say never judge a book by its cover? Well, Maya Johnson learned the hard way that most people do exactly that, especially when it comes to black women and wealth. This is the story of Maya, and how one trip to get her grandmother's ring appraised changed everything she thought she knew about respect, assumptions, and the power of family legacy. It started 6 months ago when she was 28, working as a social worker at a community center in Detroit. She'd been there for 5 years, helping kids navigate the system, making barely enough to cover her student loans and rent on her one-bedroom apartment. Maya was the kind of person who believed in doing the work that mattered, even when it didn't pay well. She'd wake up at 5 a.m. to prep for her GED classes, spend lunch breaks writing grant applications, and stay late helping teenagers with college essays. That's the kind of purpose she thought mattered until her world got turned upside down. Her grandmother Esther had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when Maya was 12. Grandma Esther worked double shifts as a hospital cleaner, but she always made sure Maya had everything she needed. She'd been gone for 2 years now, but Maya still wore her ring every single day. It was this simple band with what looked like a regular stone. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed expensive. Just a family heirloom that reminded Maya of Sunday mornings making pancakes and evening prayers before bed. That's the kind of sentimental value she thought the ring had until she decided to get it insured. She was at the community center helping Marcus, one of her kids, practice for his college interview when David walked in. He was there volunteering with a mentorship program. This tall, well-dressed guy who clearly came from money but seemed genuinely interested in making a difference. "You're really good at this," he said, after watching her coach Marcus through some tough questions. "These kids deserve someone who believes in them," she replied, not really paying attention to his expensive watch or designer clothes. Most people wouldn't stick around after hours like this. David was a financial advisor whose family owned a chain of investment firms across Michigan. For the next 3 months, they were inseparable. He'd bring coffee for her early morning classes, stay late to help with the after-school program, and listen to her talk about her dreams of expanding youth services in underserved communities. He seemed to genuinely respect her work, even though his world was completely different. When she'd mentioned struggling to pay for program supplies, he'd quietly make donations. When her car broke down, he helped her find a reliable mechanic instead of just throwing money at the problem. She was falling hard, and she thought he was, too. He'd hold her hand during their walks through the city, talk about building something real together, and make her feel like her work actually mattered to someone with resources. But then, she met his family. The dinner invitation came after 4 months of dating. "My parents are dying to meet you," he said. "They've heard so much about your work at the center." Maya spent her last $50 on a new dress from Target, styled her natural hair perfectly, and wore her grandmother's ring for good luck. She had no idea she was walking into a battlefield. The first dinner at their house was like stepping into a different universe for her. The Montgomery family lived in Bloomfield Hills in this massive colonial with a circular driveway, perfectly manicured gardens, and more cars in the garage than Maya had owned in her entire life. Patricia Montgomery was a corporate lawyer who carried herself like she owned every room she entered. Richard Montgomery was a real estate mogul who spoke in numbers and deals. They had money, generational money, and they wanted everyone to know it. Patricia greeted her with this perfectly practiced smile. "So you're the social worker David's been telling us about," she said, making Maya's occupation sound like a cute hobby. Throughout dinner, she kept making these little comments. "It's so noble how you're helping those people in the inner city. I imagine the pay isn't much, but the satisfaction must be rewarding. David mentioned you take the bus to work. How environmentally conscious of you. That's an interesting ring, dear. Vintage costume jewelry has such character." Richard was quieter but complicit, nodding along while his wife dissected every aspect of Maya's life. David would squeeze Maya's hand under the table and change the subject, but he never directly challenged his mother's comments. The worst part was how subtle it all was. Patricia never said anything directly offensive, but every comment was designed to remind Maya that she didn't belong in their world. When Maya mentioned her grandmother raising her, Patricia's response was, "How tragic. Single-parent homes are so challenging." When Maya talked about her college scholarships, Patricia said, "Affirmative action programs have really opened up opportunities, haven't they?" But Maya loved David, so she kept trying. She sent Patricia a thoughtful thank you note after dinner, brought homemade cookies to the next family gathering, and even invited them to one of her program's fundraisers. Patricia attended for exactly 30 minutes, took one photo for her social media, and left early with some excuse about a headache. She told herself that love would be enough, that they'd eventually see who she really was beyond their assumptions. David kept reassuring her that his parents just needed time to warm up to her. But Maya could feel the judgment in every interaction. The way Patricia would look at her clothes, her hair, her mannerisms. It was like being studied under a microscope and found wanting. The ring comments bothered her the most. Patricia would make these little observations. "Still wearing that sweet little piece," or "Your grandmother must have loved antique-style jewelry." Each comment felt like a tiny cut, a reminder that in their world, even her most precious family heirloom was seen as cheap and insignificant. Then David proposed to her. He did it right there at the community center where they'd met. Got down, on one knee in front of all her kids, and presented her with this stunning solitaire that probably cost more than she made in 2 years. For about 2 weeks, she thought she was living in a fairy tale. Then they went to tell his parents, and Patricia's first words weren't congratulations. They were, "Well, I suppose we'll need to discuss the prenuptial agreement." She said it like she was mentioning the weather, completely casual, while cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon. David shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, can we just celebrate for one night?" "Darling, business and pleasure. You know how important it is to protect what we've built." That night, Patricia called Maya directly. "Sweet girl, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's just that David has worked so hard to build his portfolio, and with your situation being what it is, we need to protect the family interests." The prenup was brutal. Maya would have no claim to any Montgomery family assets, including the business, real estate holdings, or investment portfolios. Any future earnings during the marriage would be considered separate property if they came from David's work or family connections. In case of divorce, Maya would receive a maximum of $50,000 for every year of marriage, capped at 5 years. She would have no inheritance rights and no claim to any gifts given to David by his family. There was even a clause about maintaining appropriate social standards and not engaging in any activities that might embarrass the Montgomery name. David sat there while his mother's lawyer explained each clause to Maya, occasionally wincing, but never objecting. "It's just a formality," he whispered to her afterward. "My parents are old-fashioned about this stuff. It doesn't mean anything to us." But it meant everything to her. It meant they saw her as a gold digger who needed to be legally restrained from taking their precious money. It meant they thought she was with David for his wealth rather than his character. It meant they believed she was fundamentally untrustworthy and inferior. The lawyer kept emphasizing how generous the terms were, how most prenups offered much less to parties in Maya's position. Even the legal language was designed to make her feel small. She signed it anyway. She signed it because she loved David and thought love would be enough to overcome his family's prejudices. She signed it because she wanted to prove she wasn't after their money. She signed it because part of her had internalized their message that someone like her should be grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance she could get. She signed it while sitting in that marble-floored law office, wearing her grandmother's ring, with Patricia watching her like she'd just successfully completed a business transaction. "There," Patricia said with satisfaction. "Now we can all relax and focus on planning this wedding." But Maya knew the real message. She was now legally bound to her place in their hierarchy, forever marked as someone who needed to be controlled and contained. The ring on her finger, her grandmother's ring, felt heavier than ever. This little band that had survived decades of her grandmother's hard work, that had been worn while scrubbing hospital floors and raising a granddaughter alone, was now sitting in the same room as documents designed to keep her powerless. If only she had known what she was really wearing. 3 months after the wedding, everything changed for Maya. She'd never known much about her family history beyond her grandmother. Esther had raised her with love, but few details about where they'd come from or who they'd been before Maya's world became just the two of them. What Maya did know was that her grandmother had worked incredibly hard her entire life. Double shifts, at the hospital, cleaning offices on weekends, taking in sewing to make ends meet. Esther had sacrificed everything to make sure Maya could go to college and build a better life. Her grandmother had been gone for 2 years, but Maya still felt her presence every day. In the way she approached her work, in her determination to help others, and especially in the ring she never took off. It was just after her honeymoon that Maya decided to get the ring properly insured. David had been talking about updating their insurance policies, adding her jewelry to his family's comprehensive coverage. "That little thing?" Patricia had said when Maya mentioned wanting to insure it. "Sweetie, our policy only covers items worth more than $5,000. I'm sure your grandmother's ring is precious to you, but it's probably not worth the paperwork." But Maya wanted to do it anyway. She'd never had anything appraised before, and she thought it would be nice to have official documentation of its sentimental value. She chose Prestige Jewelers in downtown Detroit, a place that looked serious and professional. She'd called ahead and explained that she had a family heirloom she needed appraised for insurance purposes. The woman at the front desk looked her up and down when she walked in. Maya was coming straight from work, wearing her usual jeans and community center t-shirt with her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "I have an appointment for an appraisal," Maya said. "Of course, honey. Let's see what you've got." Maya slipped off her ring and placed it on the black velvet cloth. The sales associate picked it up with barely concealed amusement. "This is what you want appraised?" she asked, holding it up to the light with obvious skepticism. "Yes, it was my grandmother's." "Well, it's very sweet. Vintage costume jewelry can have some value, I suppose. Though I should warn you, our appraisal fee is $200, and that might be more than this piece is worth." Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she'd already paid the fee over the phone. I'd still like to know. The associate shrugged and took the ring to the back room. Maya could hear her talking to someone, their voices carrying hints of amusement. Got another family heirloom situation, she heard. Looks like something from a vintage shop. Maya sat there for 20 minutes, feeling smaller and smaller as other customers came and went with their obviously expensive pieces. She was starting to regret the whole thing when she heard a commotion from the back room. "Sir, I think you need to see this," someone called out urgently. Then the master jeweler came rushing out, an older white man with decades of experience written in the lines around his eyes. He was holding Maya's ring with hands that were actually trembling. "Ma'am," he said, his voice careful and controlled, "where did you get this ring?" "It was my grandmother's. She wore it every day until she passed." He looked at her with new eyes, suddenly seeing her differently. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to wait here while I make some calls. This is not what we initially thought." The sales associate who'd been so dismissive suddenly looked nervous. "Mr. Kellerman, what's wrong?" "Get me my reference books, the Rare Gemstone Guides, and call Dr. Williams at the Gemological Institute." Maya sat there for another hour, watching the entire staff of the jewelry store transform from casual dismissal to barely contained excitement. Phone calls were made, books were consulted, equipment was brought out that she'd never seen before. Finally, Mr. Kellerman sat down across from her with her ring in a special protective case. "Ms. Montgomery," he said, "I need to ask you some questions about your grandmother's background." "What do you know about your family history?" Mr. Kellerman asked gently. "Not much," Maya admitted. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She worked at Detroit General Hospital for 40 years. We didn't have much, but she made sure I had everything I needed." Mr. Kellerman nodded slowly. "Did she ever mention where this ring came from? Any stories about her childhood or her parents?" "She'd sometimes say it was from the old country, but she never talked much about the past. She said some things were too painful to remember." He pulled out a thick reference book and opened it to a page marked with several sticky notes. "Ms. Montgomery, what I'm about to tell you might be overwhelming. This ring contains what we call a Padparadscha sapphire. It's one of the rarest gemstones in the world, found primarily in Sri Lanka and Madagascar." Maya stared at the pictures in the book. The stones looked exactly like what was in her grandmother's ring. "But more than that," he continued, "this particular stone has characteristics that match a very famous missing gem. The Ceylon star, a 45-carat Padparadscha that disappeared from a private collection in 1943. 1943? Maya's head was spinning. During World War II, many wealthy families hid their valuables or fled with them. Some gems were never recovered. This stone, Ms. Montgomery, if it's authentic, and all my preliminary tests suggest it is, would be worth approximately $50 million. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. $50 million. She looked down at her hands, at the finger where her grandmother's cheap costume jewelry had sat for decades. "Are you certain?" "I've been in this business for 35 years, and I've never been more certain of anything. We'll need to do additional authentication, bring in specialists, verify the provenance. But Ms. Montgomery, your grandmother was wearing one of the most valuable rings in the world to her hospital job every day." Maya thought about all those years watching her grandmother scrub floors, work double shifts, worry about bills. She thought about Patricia's condescending comments, about signing that prenup, about feeling ashamed of her family's humble origins. The drive home was a blur. She kept looking at her ring, this simple band that had never seemed special to anyone except her. Now she understood why her grandmother had never taken it off, why she'd made Maya promise to always wear it. That evening, David was working late at the office. Maya sat alone in their apartment, holding the preliminary appraisal paperwork, trying to process what this meant. Her phone rang. It was Patricia. "Maya, darling, David mentioned you went to get that little ring looked at today. I hope you didn't waste too much money on the appraisal." "Actually, Patricia, I did learn something interesting." "Oh? Was it worth more than we thought? Maybe a few $100s?" Maya took a deep breath. $50 million. Silence. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "The ring is worth $50 million. It's a rare Padparadscha sapphire that's been missing from a private collection since 1943. More silence, then Patricia's voice, much sharper now. "That's impossible. I have the preliminary appraisal right here. They're bringing in specialists tomorrow to confirm, but the master jeweler is confident." "Maya, I think someone is trying to scam you. These appraisal places sometimes, it's Prestige Jewelers." "Patricia, the same place where you bought David's wedding ring." She could hear Patricia calling for Richard in the background, her voice urgent and panicked. "Richard! Richard! Get on the phone!" "What's wrong, dear?" "Maya says that ring of hers is worth $50 million. $50 million? Richard's voice was incredulous. "That's impossible." "That's what I said. But she claims Prestige Jewelers." "Prestige? They authenticated it at Prestige?" Maya could hear the shift in his tone, the sudden realization that this wasn't a scam or a mistake. "Maya," Richard said, his voice completely different now, "are you absolutely certain about this appraisal?" "They're doing additional authentication tomorrow. But yes, apparently, my grandmother was wearing one of the world's rarest gemstones while she cleaned hospital floors for 40 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Patricia's voice came back, much smaller now. "Maya, dear, I think we need to talk." "About what, Patricia? About how you spent months telling me my grandmother's ring was worthless costume jewelry? About how you made me feel ashamed of my family's humble origins? About how you insisted on a prenup to protect your assets from someone you thought had nothing? Now, Maya, let's not what? Let's not talk about how you treated me like I was trying to steal from your family when I was actually wearing more wealth on my finger than your entire net worth." The conversation ended with Patricia promising to call back after she'd processed this information, but Maya already knew exactly what came next. The authentication took 3 days. Experts flew in from New York and Los Angeles. The ring was X-rayed, chemically analyzed, and compared to historical records. Every test confirmed what Mr. Kellerman had suspected. Maya's grandmother had somehow ended up with the Ceylon Star, one of the most valuable missing gemstones in the world. The story that emerged was incredible. Research into the ring's provenance revealed that Maya's great-grandfather had been a jeweler in Sri Lanka who'd helped hide valuable gems from looters during political upheaval in the 1940s. The Ceylon Star had been entrusted to him by a fleeing family, and when they never returned, it had passed down through the generations. Maya's grandmother had immigrated to America as a young woman, working menial jobs while literally wearing a fortune that she probably never knew the true value of. The authentication made national news. "Hospital cleaner's ring worth $50 million, the headlines read. Maya's phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests, documentary offers, and congratulations from people who'd suddenly discovered they knew her. But the person she was most interested in watching was David. He couldn't handle the role reversal. He'd fallen in love with being Maya's savior. the wealthy man who'd rescued the poor social worker. Now that she had more money than his entire family combined, he didn't know how to relate to her. He'd make jokes about being a kept man now, or suggest that maybe she should quit her job at the community center since she didn't need the money anymore. "That's not the point," Maya would tell him. "I do this work because it matters, not because I need the paycheck." But he couldn't understand why someone with $50 million would still want to help kids in Detroit instead of moving to, you see, Bloomfield Hills and joining the country club. Patricia's transformation was even more dramatic. Suddenly, Maya's background was fascinating rather than humble. Her grandmother was remarkably resilient rather than just another cleaning lady. The community center work was so admirable instead of a cute hobby, but Maya had seen her true colors, and no amount of backtracking could erase months of condescension and judgment. The final straw came when David suggested they should renew their vows and update the prenuptial agreement. "Now that your situation has changed, we should probably adjust the terms," he said, as if he was doing her a favor. "My situation hasn't changed, David," she replied. "I'm the same person I was yesterday. The only thing that's different is that now you know I was never after your family's money. But Maya, we could travel, buy a bigger house, really live the life we deserve." Who's we, David? Because the man I fell in love with would have defended me to his family. He would have seen my worth before he knew about the ring. He would have valued my work regardless of my bank account. She gave him back his ring and kept the prenup, not because she was bitter, but because it reminded her of an important lesson about people's true character. 6 months later, she established the Esther Johnson Foundation, focusing on educational opportunities for underserved youth and supporting hospital workers, the people like her grandmother who keep the world running while remaining invisible. She still works at the community center, though now she's also funding 3 new locations across the city. She's met someone new, Marcus. Yes, the same Marcus she'd helped prepare for college interviews. He's graduated now, working as a teacher while finishing his master's degree in education. He makes $42,000 a year compared to her $50 million, but he sees her value in ways that money can't measure. He knew her before the ring story broke, and he'd fallen for the woman who stayed late helping kids with homework, not the woman who'd inherited a fortune. Her grandmother's gift wasn't just the money. It was the lesson that worth isn't determined by other people's recognition, and that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that others overlook. That prenup was supposed to protect the Montgomery family from a gold-digging social worker. Instead, it ended up protecting Maya from people who only valued her for what she could give them rather than who she truly was. That ring taught Maya the most valuable lesson of her life. Never let anyone else determine your worth. Her grandmother wore $50 million to work every day, not because she was trying to show off, but because it represented her family's resilience and survival. Maya learned that true value isn't about what others can see or recognize. It's about the strength you carry within yourself. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe for more real-life stories that will change how you see the world. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been judged for something that others didn't understand? Have you ever discovered that something you thought was worthless was actually precious? We read every single comment and love hearing your stories. Until next time, remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it. Keep wearing your ring, whatever it represents to you.